Being the number one pick is a dream for a lot of young hoopers. It's a highly coveted position, as you get the largest rookie contract, the highest chance to play right away, and most importantly, the organization prioritizes your development. But the flip side is that the expectations are high. The franchise chose you to be their savior, and if you don't live up to the hype, you face the most scrutiny, as several people's jobs are dependent on your success. Then you get the dreaded bust label that seems to follow you, even long after your playing days are over. But every story is different, as some players dealt with injuries, off-the-court issues, or just being drafted by the wrong team. My new series called Forgotten Ones tells the story of the top picks that have fallen by the wayside for one reason or another. Barry Caroll was a highly skilled 7-footer that could do it all. He had an advanced post game along with a decent mid-range jumper. He could also block shots and rebound pretty well. These attributes helped him have a dominant career at Purdue. Since he was the best college center in an era dominated by bigs, he was the first pick in 1980 by Golden State. The day before the draft, the Warriors traded Robert Parish in the 3rd pick to Boston, which they used to select Kevin Mchale. The success of Mchale and Parish in Boston unfairly cast Joe in a bad light for pretty much his whole career, as some people called him a bust, especially since the Warriors continued to be a losing team. His nonchalant demeanor didn't help either, as some perceived it as a lack of passion for the game, or even laziness, leading to the nickname, Joe Barely Cares. But despite all the talk around his name, Joe was a very productive player in the league, averaging 24 points a game at his peak and even becoming an all-star. Unfortunately, his reputation overrode his performance as a player, as he is one of the most overlooked number 1 picks ever. Welcome to PG Hoops, and let's get down to it. Joe was born on July 24, 1958 in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He attended Denver East High in Denver, Colorado. He had initially played soccer his whole life, as he didn't start playing basketball until his sophomore year. But the now 7-foot Joe averaged 20 points and 12 rebounds as a senior, and he committed to play at Purdue. The Boilermakers were a solid team in 1976, with NBA talent in Walter Jordan, Tom Scheffler, and Jerry Sheasting. Joe came off the bench behind Tom, but he showed a lot of potential. On December 22nd against Arizona, he recorded the school's only triple-double with 16 points, 16 rebounds, and 11 blocks. Purdue was one of the top teams in the nation, as they were even on both sides of the ball. They finished 20-8 as they faced North Carolina in their first tournament game. Joe put up 3 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks on 1 of 4 shooting, but they couldn't stop Phil Ford, as his 27-point performance led the Tar Heels to a 3-point win. Joe's freshman year saw him average 8 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3 blocks. In only 20 minutes a game, Joe set the freshman record for rebounds and blocks. And Tom was now onto the NBA, so Joe was the starter as a sophomore. Even with his interior presence, Purdue's defense got worse. They stumbled to start the season, suffering bad losses to Indiana State, Miami of Ohio, and San Diego State. The Big Ten was a different beast, as they went 11-7. Their 16-11 record wasn't enough for the tournament, but Joe kept improving, averaging 16 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks. Fred Shaw stepped down as the coach, while Lee Rose took his place, as his slow-paced system helped unlock Joe's full form. Purdue was rolling this year, going 10-2 heading into conference play. They even got a signature win over Magic Johnson's Michigan State squad. But although Purdue finished with the same Big Ten record as Michigan State, the selection committee chose the Spartans instead. So a 23-7 Purdue team would be in the NIT. They would make it all the way to the championship game, but they would lose by 1 point to Indiana. Joe put himself on the map as a junior, averaging 23 points, 10 rebounds, a steal, and 2 blocks, making the All-Big Ten first team and the 3rd-team All-America. The 1979 season would be one of the best in school history, even though they finished the regular season at 17-9. The Boilermakers had a top 25 defense, mainly because Joe was holding it down in the middle. Purdue made the tournament again, and Joe would really cement his status as a top college prospect, as he dropped 33 points and 13 rebounds in the 8-point win over LaSalle. In the next game against St. John's, he put up 36 points, 12 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocks on 14 of 21 shooting in a dominant win. In the Sweet 16 against Indiana, Joe had a modest 11 points and 8 rebounds. But Purdue survived a 30-point showing from Isaiah Thomas, winning by 7 and booking an Elite 8 matchup with Duke. Joe dropped 26 points and 6 rebounds as the Boilermakers made their first Final Four since 1969, facing Kiki Vandeweghe and UCLA. Joe had a solid game with 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks, but he committed 6 turnovers. Kiki dropped 24 points on 9 of 12 shooting to help the Bruins advance to the national championship. Joe went off in the 3rd place game against Iowa with 35 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 blocks on 14 of 17 shooting in the 17-point win. Joe's elite senior season saw him average 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 blocks, being named a first-team All-American. Joe ended his Purdue career with an economics degree and a strong chance of being selected in the top 3 in the 1980 draft. The Warriors had been an average team since winning their title in 1975. They had a fourth-year center, Robert Parish, who was playing pretty well, but with 1980 being his contract year, the Warriors couldn't afford to keep him. Also, they saw Joe as a better offensive option, so they decided to trade Robert and their 3rd overall pick to the Celtics for their 1st overall pick and the 13th pick, with the Celtics focused on drafting Kevin Mchale. Golden State drafted Joe 1st overall in 1980, as the Celtics were still able to get Mchale, with the Jazz selecting Daryl Griffith 2nd. Robert will later describe this trade as going from the outhouse to the penthouse. The Warriors were a young team, but they just acquired 2 great scorers in World B. Free and Bernard King, who was trying to rebuild his image after pleading guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault in the offseason. Their other rookie, Larry Smith, brought toughness and rebounding, while Purvis Sharp was an underrated scorer in his own right. But since 1977, every first-round pick the Warriors made would hold out in the beginning of training camp for more money, as Joe did the same. His agent even went as far as threatening that Joe would sign to play overseas and re-enter the draft next year. But Joe didn't have a lot of leverage, as it was uncertain that he would be the number 1 pick next year, and with the high probability that he could actually make less money, he signed his rookie deal. With their top pick locked in, the Warriors marketed Joe as their franchise guy, and the fans finally started coming back to the games. Joe had an all-around skill set that made him extremely effective. In the first 2 months of the season, he showed he can contribute in multiple areas of the game. On November 27th against the Lakers, he dropped 32 points and 7 rebounds on 16 of 24 shooting. On January 2nd against Boston, he dropped 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 blocks. He had a 46-point and 14-rebound performance in a close loss to San Diego on February 20th. Joe really hit his stride in the final month, averaging 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks on 52% shooting, including a 37-point, 21-rebound performance on March 15th. World B. Free and Bernard combined for over 40 points a game, and Larry Smith turned out to be a good pick. But the Warriors' main weakness was their lack of defense. Joe was a good shot blocker, but he was the only one on the team, as they finished 39-43, missing the playoffs. Joe had a solid rookie season, showing that he could do it all, as he finished 5th in Rookie of the Year voting, with averages of 19 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks. The Boston Celtics won the title this year. It didn't mean much now, but the Celtics' success in the 80s would be unfairly held against Joe for some reason. In 1981, the Warriors traded for former ABA player Mike Gale to be their starting point guard, but the offense would be much different as Purvis Short took a major leap this year, so Joe's shot attempts went down, but he would have the most efficient season of his career. He dropped 36 times, grabbed double-digit rebounds in 28 games, and blocked at least 3 shots in 16 games, with his best performance coming on March 26 against Portland with 32 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 blocks. The Warriors had 3 20-point scorers, while their defense improved a lot, as their 45-37 record was their best in 5 years, but they would miss the playoffs by 1 game. Joe averaged 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks on a career-high 52% shooting. The Warriors continued to have financial problems, as Bernard's rookie deal was set to expire, and since they didn't have the money to pay him, he was traded to the Knicks for Michael Ray Richardson in a 5th-round pick. The Warriors made another confusing trade, as World B. Free was sent to the Cavs for Ron Brewer. Then after just 33 games, Richardson was traded to the Nets for Sleepy Floyd, but this trade would actually work out for them. The Warriors drafted Lester Connor and Derek Smith in 1982, as now that the Warriors got rid of their top scorers, Joe would be the number 1 option. In the second game of the season, he dropped 20 points, 15 rebounds, 2 steals, and 4 blocks on 8 of 12 shooting. A week later against Cleveland, he dropped 30 points, 11 rebounds, 2 steals, and a career-high 8 blocks. He would have his best game as a pro on March 5th against the Jazz, when he dropped a career-high 52 points, along with 14 rebounds and 5 blocks. Joe was definitely playing like an all-star, and the Warriors were a respectable 16-25 at the halfway point, but they would hit a major skid after this, and finish the season at 30-52. In his career year, Joe averaged 24 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, and 2 blocks. Joe was now in the same position as Parish, entering his 4th year looking for a new deal. Joe actually changed agents, as he was told to hold out next season if he wasn't offered an extension. Golden State didn't budge, so Joe entered the 1983 season feeling like this would be his last in the Bay Area. The Warriors had the 6th pick in 1983, and they chose Russell Cross from Purdue, but he would only last 1 season in the league. Al Adams was relieved of his head coaching duties, but moved to the GM position as Johnny Batch replaced him. Joe picked up right where he left off, averaging 22 points and 7 rebounds in the first month. He added another dimension to his game with his passing, as he dished at least 5 assists in 11 games. Sleepy Floyd took a huge leap in year 2, while Lester Connor had a good sophomore campaign as well. But Golden State was stuck in neutral as they finished 37-45, with their playoff drought continuing. Joe averaged 20 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.5 steals, and 2 blocks, as the Celtics won another championship this year. Even though he was technically a free agent, Joe didn't want to sit around and wait for other offers, so he would make an unprecedented move, signing to play for Olimpia Milano, an Italian club. In his one season with the team, he won the Italian League Championship, was selected to the All-League team, and won the FIBA Korak Cup. When he arrived back in the US in 1985, he was a restricted free agent. The Bucks swiftly made a move to sign him, as he was the perfect center that the Bucks needed. Joe's agent wanted to ensure that the Warriors wouldn't match his offer, so he proposed a $9.5 million offer sheet with a $2 million signing bonus, a contract that the Warriors couldn't possibly match. This was an opportunity for Joe to enter a better situation and possibly face Parish in the playoffs and quiet some of the doubters. But in a move that stunned everyone, the Warriors matched the offer, and they declined to work out a sign-and trade with the Bucks. They made Joe the highest paid player in franchise history. This is coming from an organization that lost Wilt Chamberlain over financial issues. The owner, Frank Mchale, didn't even show up to the press conference to announce his re-signing, as Joe wasn't invited either. But behind the scenes, there were larger forces at work, as Frank finally realized that he didn't have the money to compete in the NBA. But Jim Fitzgerald really wanted to buy the Warriors, so he had to sell his majority share of the Bucks to make this possible. After he sold the team, he then bought the Warriors, as this is most likely the reason that Golden State suddenly had so much money. Now that Joe was back with the Warriors, his reputation with the fans wasn't the best. His decision to play overseas didn't sit well with a lot of people, as the contempt was made worse due to his enormous contract. With the success of the Celtics constantly serving as a reminder of what they could have had, Joe was booed relentlessly at home games, but he was an introvert, so he really didn't talk to the media and address anything, leading to the synonymous nickname, Joe Barely Cares. The Warriors finally hit on a draft pick when they selected Chris Mullin in 1985. Purvis Short continued to be the leading scorer, but Joe wasn't far behind him. He had a great all-around game on November 2nd against the Lakers, with 28 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. He dropped the season-high 34 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 blocks on March 4th against the Spurs. Joe had 51 games with at least 20, 25 double-doubles, and 3 games with at least 5 blocks. Sleepy kept getting better, while Chris and Terry Teagle averaged double figures, and Larry led the league in offensive rebounds. But giving up 117 points a game isn't a recipe for winning, so the Warriors finished 30-52. Joe averaged 21 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, and 2 blocks. The Warriors selected Chris Washburn with the 3rd pick of the 1986 draft, and they also hired George Carroll as their coach. Purvis was injured most of the year, so Joe had to pick up the slack. He was averaging his usual numbers, but the Warriors were 23-18 at the break. He possibly had the best game of his career on February 1st against New Jersey, with 43 points, 24 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 4 blocks. Joe finished in the top 20 in points and blocks as he was named to his first and only All-Star game, as Sleepy joined him. Chris Mullin continued to get better, but Chris Washburn was turning out to be a huge bust as he was secretly dealing with addiction. Regardless, Don Nelson had the Warriors winning, as their 42-40 record would secure their first playoff berth in a decade. Joe averaged 21 points, 7.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 1.5 blocks. The Warriors faced the Jazz in the first round, as Joe's playoff debut was shaky, with 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists, but on 5 of 18 shooting in a loss. He dropped 22-7 with 4 blocks in Game 2, but they lost again and were on the brink of elimination. Joe didn't play great over the next 2 games, but they were both wins, and now they had to go to a Game 5. Joe had the best playoff game of his career, with 24 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 blocks in a shocking win for the Warriors. They faced the Lakers in the second round, but it seemed like Larry Smith was the only Warrior that could get aboard, as even though Joe dropped at least 20 in 4 out of the 5 games, he averaged less than 5 rebounds in the gentleman's sweep for the Lakers. Even with the improbable playoff run, the Warriors fans still let Joe hear it when he stepped on the court, most likely because in the 7 years he was drafted, he just came off his first postseason, while the Celtics had won 3 titles in that span. Joe's production was a lot lower than usual to start 1987, as he was shooting under 38%, but he would be traded for another #1 pick, as the Warriors acquired Ralph Sampson from Houston, even though he was already dealing with injuries. Don Nelson had this to say about the trade: "I actually thought it was important that we make a move of any kind to get rid of Joe Barry Caroll. He had outlived his usefulness in Golden State. He had become an unpopular player, and had the nickname of Joe Barely Cares. I knew Ralph was hurt, had been struggling, and probably was never going to return to what he was, but I still pulled the trigger because I thought it was important to make that move." Since the Rockets had Hakeem, Joe would come off the bench for the first time in his career. He still played well, jumping 25 points and 13 rebounds against Detroit, and 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 blocks against Phoenix. But Houston didn't have much outside of Hakeem, as their second leading scorer was Purvis Short. The Rockets finished 46-36, securing a first-round matchup with Dallas. Between the two teams, Joe averaged 13 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks, as he would start every game in this series. But his production wasn't what Houston needed, as he shot 38% and the Mavs won in 4. Joe was traded again, this time to the Nets, who were coached by Willis Reed. Joe joined Buck Williams in the front court with a starting lineup that featured Roy Hinson, Chris Morris, and Lester Connor. Although Joe would never reach his Golden State production again, he was playing solid ball, however on questionable efficiency. The Nets were sitting at 500 through the first 20 games, but they would collapse, finishing at 26-56. The main issue with this team was that they didn't have a go-to scorer. Roy Hinson led the team with just 16 points a game, and that wouldn't cut it in an offense-catered league. Joe averaged 14 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks. As the Nets went into a rebuild in 1989, they traded Buck Williams to the Blazers for Sam Bowie in a first-rounder. They drafted Mookie Blaylock while signing Anthony Mason and Purvis Short, who was now a teammate of Joe's for the third time. Joe would be buried on the bench behind Bowie, Chris Dudley, and Charles Shackelford. He would play in a small role before being traded at the deadline to Denver. The Nuggets still had their backcourt of Fat Lever and Michael Adams, as Alex English was still going at 36 years old. Joe would start and bring much needed defense to the team, recording 5 games at least 5 blocks in the month of March. He even dropped a season-high 25 points along with 9 rebounds and 2 steals on April 4th against Charlotte. The Nuggets' all-offense approach led them to a 43-39 record, earning a first-round matchup with the Spurs. Joe averaged 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks this season. And although he had 12 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 blocks in Game 2, this would be the second of 3 straight losses for Denver, so they were eliminated. With the Nuggets ready to blow it up in 1990, Joe was released, and he wouldn't be picked up until January 26, signing a deal with the Suns. He would have a limited role on this team as he only played in 11 games, with his best showing being an 8-point, 3 assists, and 2-block performance on March 4th against Charlotte. The Suns finished 55-27 and faced the Jazz in the first round, but Joe only played 15 minutes the whole series, as the Suns lost in 4. In Joe's final season, he averaged 3.5 points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist. Joe would be waived before the 1991 season, and he would subsequently retire. But he would show that there was more to life than basketball, as he used his platform to establish programs to help underdeserved communities. He's authored several books under his own publishing company, and he does financial advising as well. Joe Barry Caroll was picked first overall in 1980 to be the supposed savior of the Warriors, and he played well early on. But the lack of team success combined with the fact that he was traded for 2 Hall of Famers made Joe the scapegoat for the Warriors' problems. But people fail to realize that he got drafted by a terrible organization at the time. The Warriors really couldn't compete financially with the bigger markets, so they couldn't sign any big free agents or re-sign their young players after they were doing well. They also missed on just about every draft pick during his time there, as they continuously failed to build a competent team around him, as most of the things people said about him were completely out of his control. His introverted personality also didn't endear him to the fans, as nobody really knew what to make of him. Team legend Al Attles said it best. If you look at his numbers, Joe Barry Caroll was a good player. He was so maligned because a lot of people thought as a center, especially the first pick, he should be able to just take over a team. He was good, but he didn't have that. Joe even admits himself, had I done better with the media, perhaps it would be too bad Joe didn't have a better situation, instead of he was a situation. Maybe he wasn't a Hall of Famer, but it's unfair to call him a bust, as he was pretty productive his first 7 years in the league, with an all-star appearance to show for it. Thank you so much, I really appreciate y'all for watching this video. This is my first episode in my new installment, Forgotten Ones. I feel like Joe's story was extremely interesting, because I've always seen people put him in like, oh, he's one of the top 10 biggest draft busts of all time. I'm like, how? 3rd year in the league, he's averaging 24 points a game with like 8 rebounds and 2 blocks. That's great production. A lot of the stuff people complained about was out of his control. Nobody knew that Kevin Mchale and Robert Parish were going to be Hall of Fame players, and they were going to be part of a dynasty in the 80s. Nobody knew that. You can't blame Joe for that. You get drafted by the cheapest organization in the league, because like every time a good young player, they're in that restricted free agent status and you reach that 4th year of the contract. Oh, sorry, we don't have enough money to sign you. We'll just let you walk, or we'll trade you for nothing. They missed almost all their draft picks. Like Chris Mullin was like legit the only draft pick that really worked out for them. Larry Smith was good, I can't lie. Larry Smith was good in his role. I think also back then, players had to like really get their name out there. Like really get out there in the media, get out there, let the fans see who they are. Because you're not seeing these guys unless they're on TV or unless you're going to the actual games. You know, so it's not like you can go and watch a guy do a live stream and see what he really does or something like that, you know. But I don't think he's a bust. I really don't think he's a bust. Like, he just got drafted to the wrong organization. people got so caught up in the fact that, oh my God, he got traded for 2 guys and just happened to be Hall of Famers, just happened to be 2 guys on probably one of the best dynasties in the league. It was just unfortunate circumstances. I don't know, I feel like it was a lot of unfair stuff that was really held against him for no reason. Also because he didn't really speak to the media. He had to come up with something like, oh, he lacks passion for the game. Oh, he's lazy because he won't speak to us and we don't know what's going on in his head. We can't figure him out. So he's I don't know he's lazy, something wrong with him. I don't know. Let me know how you like my first installment. But thank you. Be safe. Stay on the grind. Have a great day. I'm out. Peace.